If you stumbled across this video, there's a good chance that from the outside, your life might look pretty full and almost pretty perfect, right? Like you've got the ideal career, perhaps you even do explore a few passions on the side as well, and projects, and yet you are still feeling quite empty, like there's a void, like you're not living up to your full potential. I know that feeling and I have lived it and felt it throughout different points of my life. But more interestingly, I have been on almost 100 calls over the last few weeks with women who consider themselves both ambitious and multi-passionate. And what was interesting as we explored maybe these feelings and the gaps in their lives, especially as it related to why you even want to build a personal brand, that was the context, it became clear that there were some key areas in which freedom was really, really important to us as individuals, as multi-passionate women. And when one or more of these is off, that void really kind of expands, if you'd like, and that feeling of lack can really take over despite the appearance of a perfect life. And so that's actually what I want to talk about in this video. There's 3 types of freedom that are sometimes underexplored in this context, and we're going to go a little bit deeper. Now, if you're new here, I'm a senior engineer in the tech space, a content creator, artist, and importantly, somebody who's been building out systems and resources for ambitious, multi-passionate women, right? So let's explore these freedoms kind of one by one, and also how that linked back to the whole personal branding thing in the first place. So let's just get into it. So the first freedom on this list is what we're calling work or financial freedom. And the core idea here is that ambitious, multi-passionate women, in order to feel that sense of fullness, need to be able to make money, make a living, make that exchange effectively in a way that ties back to their passions, their skills, their energy, and importantly, their values. Now, there's this idea for some people that work should just be work. Like, it doesn't really matter if you don't enjoy it, or, if it doesn't, fill you up, or if it doesn't align with your values or anything of that nature. It is a means to an end so that you can do the things that you want outside of life. And to be honest, I completely understand why some people would say this, especially in this economy, right? However, over extended periods of time, and from the conversations I've had, this is unsustainable, especially if you are somebody who is deeply driven by their passion, by their values, and by the energy that you exude, right? After a while, it becomes like you're chipping away at yourself. And because you spend so much time at work, right? Even a standard working week, a lot of people do more. We're talking about 40 hours. Monday to Friday, most of your working, or should I say waking hours, are at work. So it makes sense then that a sense of freedom in the work that you are doing and alignment would be something that one would be looking for. And I should clarify that stability and financial freedom in a sense that you can do what you want, impact the people that you want in your own life, that is key. And we're not really going to be kind of debating that in that sense, but it's about the fact that even when you have that, but the work itself is devoid of the things that align with you, it can be really, really draining. Actually get to the point where you are drained and burnt out as a result of it. And if you are a high agency individual, which a lot of the women who watch my channel, come to my events, or engage in my programs, and you are high agency women, and therefore there's only so long that you can do this if you are not aligned. And so without that freedom as it pertains to work, to decide to an extent what you work on or how you work on something or who you get to engage with, whether it's through your career, right, and the job that you have, or the business you're building, it doesn't matter how shiny things look on the outside. And the way this links really to your personal brand is quite interesting, because if we think about it, your personal brand is like an extension of you, or it is a presentation of you that is visible to the rest of the world. It's how people see you. And if you are deliberately constructing this personal brand, you get to decide what you pull on, right? If we go back to my formula, which is where you add a skill, a passion, your unique energy, and your values, you get to decide what you lead with, what you almost put in your shop front window, right, to the rest of the world. When you're thinking about either attracting certain career opportunities, right, and future jobs, or you're thinking about a business and the clients that you want to attract, right? And therefore, you start to craft a work setup, right, or financial setup that is more closely linked and aligned with what you want. The personal brand is almost just the vehicle for you to get there. I like to think of it in this way. Instead of a standalone thing, like we're building a personal brand for the sake of a personal brand, no, it is to get closer to these ideas of freedom that we have. And this is just an opening. The idea of work freedom is exploring these skills and these passions in different ways. So perhaps it is some client work, or perhaps it is, your 9 to 5, but perhaps it's also working and collaborating with brands. Perhaps you deliver workshops, right, and keynotes. So a lot of people make their career solely from public speaking. And when you have a personal brand that has been, like I said, crafted with intention, with your core values and passions and skills behind it, suddenly we can get closer to this version of freedom as it pertains to work. And I'm not necessarily saying that we all have to quit our jobs or do anything of that nature. For some people, it might look like that. For some people, it might look like a pivot within your own career at the moment and going down a route that, again, is more aligned with you, or even negotiating your current role, right? So that you get to express more of these facets of yourself. But the underlying thing here is the way that we make money and the way that we engage in the economy is really key to feeling a sense of freedom and autonomy over your life. And if it feels like you don't have options, like it's so far removed from you, then that's why, despite the fact everything looks beautiful on the outside, you can still end up feeling quite empty. So moving on into the second form of freedom, because you can have maybe the financial and work freedom and around the options that we were speaking about, but still feel like there's a gap in another area of your life, right? Especially as, again, it pertains to being multi-passionate and ambitious. And this is what I call development freedom. And the core idea here is about giving yourself the permission and the time, the space to explore and develop your passions and your interests without that feeling of guilt. Because this seems to be a recurring issue where you almost feel guilty for dipping into things that are not necessarily related to work and directly making money. You don't give yourself that space to explore things that really light you up or really have just been driven by your curiosity. And again, on the call with a lot of these women, brilliant women, there was a sense that they wanted to explore these different facets of themselves, these different layers. They wanted to develop them, right? Not even just scratch the surface. Sometimes it was just I'm interested, but sometimes it was like, I want to go deeper down this thing, like crocheting or like ice skating or, whatever the case is. But there was a feeling of guilt because it's not tied necessarily to the work. And this is a really key component, I think, of feeling again that sense of fulfillment, that freedom to express oneself, to develop oneself in the same way that we talk about the people of the Renaissance period, right? Some of the people we look up to, like a Da Vinci, right? These were people who had the freedom and time to express and explore their ideas and their curiosity. And granted, there is a level of privilege that allows you to do this when you don't necessarily need to work and do all these things. But I think we are downplaying or not giving ourselves enough credit for the time that we can make for the development freedom. And there is something very special about when you give yourself permission to do this. So I've spoken about before how I didn't really think I was good at art, or I told myself that I was more of a science person for years. And so I didn't really explore the visual arts very much until one day I decided I was just going to do it. I think I'd seen enough Pinterest and videos about people painting, and I said, let's give it a go. I think at that point I had come to an identity or a point where I was like, my curiosity and desire to express myself is part of who I am, right? Again, if we think about the brand as an extension of you, like it is me to explore, it is me to be curious, right? And I went along that process, and it was one of the best things I ever started, I think, in that sense of creativity and development. But I used to use this example to illustrate how it is important that that part of you gets to see light, gets to see the daylight. And if we're thinking more about the link to your personal brand, I think I already started to allude to this, but it's this idea of the identity that you allow yourself to embody, right? Or to take on. And if you have embedded curiosity and this idea of freedom to develop as part of your identity and your brand, then suddenly permission is almost a default, right? Like, if this is the type of person I am, this is the brand that I've crafted and it's embedded in a value of mine, then I don't really need explicit permission. It's implied, actually, just by virtue of me being me. And that can be a really powerful way of seeing your brand and what it allows you to do. And some things that you develop, right? Some things that you go to master and the projects you build will link directly to your personal brand. And that's lovely, right? And, maybe there's direct links to your work or opportunities you want. That is cool. That's great. That's kind of also what we're going for, like a very holistic picture or vision. But other things will just tie to your identity, and that need to grow and develop without, like, just you as a human being require this freedom. And so that is the second type of freedom I would say is very important, right? And can lead to feeling a more rich life. The freedom to develop one's passions, one's skills in line with one's values, and not be tied to necessarily work or productivity. But there is a third type of freedom that I want to discuss, because even if you have the work freedom, right, the ability to make a living in line with what you're passionate about and what you care about and what you're skilled in, and you also have that freedom and permission and time to develop your skills outside of work, and you have granted yourself that and actually carved it out, there is still a missing element, and it was a recurring theme in, I think, almost every single phone call that I took, every woman I spoke to, and it ripples across the interactions that I have. And this third and final type of freedom is impact freedom. And the core idea here is the freedom to use your passions, your skills, your energy, and your values to impact a group of people, right? Or several groups of people who are typically disenfranchised or ignored, or maybe isolated, or maybe it's just someone that you want to pour more into, a group you want to pour more into. Now, I deeply resonate with this form of freedom and have found that when this is missing, even if I am making good money in a way that I want and I have the time to, oil paint, like I said, or, powerlift or even travel, if for too long a period I have not been able to use what I have been blessed with or what I have worked towards, and going back again to your passions, your skills, your values, your energy to positively impact others, that void surfaces. Now, I, of course, have a deep passion to help, I would say, multiple groups, but the one that I speak about and have created a body of work around is multi-passionate women, right? This idea that a group who's kind of maybe been shunned or kind of palmed off as confused, maybe lazy, maybe just indecisive, all of those things. And yet they have so much that they could bring to their communities, their families, the wider world, right? Especially if you want to track in a more positive direction. I'm deeply passionate about this and impacting this group of women, right, who might not see their value at the moment or how everything comes together in that structure. And when I get to work on this, when I get to see that impact, when I get a message, a DM, or at my event, or that I'm either speaking at or hosting, somebody comes up to me, right, and says, you impacted me in this way, right? The other day I was at Tottenham Hotspurs and the young lady who was still a student said, I've never heard anybody speak about crafting a life with multiple passions and interests like that. And I've always felt like that, but I didn't understand how that would come together. Right? Or somebody says, I've been doing this and I came from this background unrelated to tech, but I was watching your videos and saw how you brought things together. I just landed my first tech job, or I just pivoted into a 6-figure tech job. And now I'm, integrating my work freedom with financial stability, some of my interests. Like, hearing those stories can be incredibly fulfilling. And so this is why it's so important, if there is a sense of emptiness in your life or like something feels off, that you explore this idea of impact freedom. And the thing is, this is not about fame or, maybe getting a big following. Those can be things that can be helpful in terms of scale and reach, but that's really not what we're talking about here. I know plenty of people who do not have hundreds of thousands of followers and subscribers who are creating an incredible impact. They're on the ground, boots on the ground, actually. They're in communities, right? They're hosting live workshops, or they're going into schools, right? Things of this nature. They are able to impact people around them as it, again, links to what they care about and what they're good at. They're taking their gifts and their talents and they're imparting it on others. They are sharing it with others. But if we are thinking about how this links to your personal brand, and again, the conversations we were having around why does it matter that you have a strong personal brand? Well, of course, this allows people to know what it is that you care for, what you stand for, and how you can positively impact them, right? So again, it's not about necessarily numbers, but if you're building a brand where people know, for example, that you care about multi-passionate women, or you care about, getting people from low-income households into the tech space and, AI literate, or whatever the case is, if people are aware of that, either because you are imparting the information that they might not be privy to, they might not know, right? So you're giving them tools, resources, there's impact in that sense, but also other doors can start to open, right? So if somebody in need of your skills, right, is in need of your expertise, is in need of your passion to help this group, now because your brand is so strong, because you are out there, they are able to connect with you, invite you into these rooms so that you can even scale up your impact in ways that you can't necessarily, or it's harder if you don't have a brand, if you're not out there, if people aren't aware of what you do. And so impact freedom is the final missing piece of the puzzle that can help when we're thinking about ambitious, multi-passionate women and those who are trying to lead full lives. And so those are the 3 types of freedoms that it became clear to me. A lot of the ambitious and multi-passionate women I spoke to were after that. That is what we were all kind of working towards. Now, of course, I have excluded things like health and like personal relationships. That is not part of the conversation that I'm having quite here, even though they are key to a full life. But what I want to get at here is sometimes one of these things is missing. And I think one of them can be off for a while before you move into another season. Ideally, when they're all aligned, beautiful, chef's kiss, right? When more than one is off for an extended period of time, I think that's when the depth of this really starts to get to you, right? Like I said, if you've got the work freedom, but the other 2 are missing, or the development freedom, but the other 2 are missing, or the impact, but the work, you get the point. And so it's really thinking about the tools that you have at hand to get you closer to these types of freedom, to this more holistic way of approaching work, development, and impact. And as we've kind of illustrated here, the personal brand can be incredibly powerful in doing that. It has changed my life in many a way and allowed me to get closer to these forms of freedom that are so important. But I just want you to know that it is possible to get closer to this and to validate you if you're feeling like something is missing, despite the fact that to everyone else, maybe your life seems perfect and shiny. Now, I would suggest that if you really felt connected to this video, that you definitely sign up to my free newsletter. And if you're interested, join the community of women who are along the same journey, right? All of us are along this path and using our personal brand as a vehicle to get closer to this type of freedom as multi-passionate women. So go ahead and take a look in the description at some of those details. Otherwise, this has been lovely. I really enjoyed this topic, and thank you so much as well for interacting when I do posts and, you know, when I do polls and try to get more information and learn more. And even to everybody who joined the calls, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with me so we can do this. I like data. But yeah, I'm just starting to ramble. I'll see you in the next video. You might want to watch this one here if you're interested in going a bit deeper into personal branding right now. And I'll see you in the next one.